Hey, thank you again for being a part of our study. We're in chapter 13 of Isaiah. So one of my favorite sayings I read in a book actually on the Gospel of John was that the Bible is shallow enough for a baby to wade in and deep enough for an adult to drown in. So put on your life jacket. We're going to get into a pretty strong passage today and again tomorrow, talking about Babylon. And Rudy and I have just been talking. Babylon here is probably best understood to be seen as the forces of evil, or the evil one himself, who attack God's people. At the root of a Babylonian spirit is pride and arrogance, self-sufficiency. So when I'm being proud and arrogant and I say, I can take care of this myself, I'm in trouble. So God must oppose this spirit, or as Rudy and I have talked about already, we wouldn't exist here today. All right? Let me just say another thing about Babylon and Assyria. They were absolutely ruthless when they defeated people. And so the horrors of war, anything you can think of about the horror of war, they perpetrated that on people. They were not good people, at anywhere close to being good. And so for God to execute judgment on them was actually a gift to the entire surrounding world. Correct. So with all that being said, let me read a couple of verses, and then I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to turn to Rudy. So in chapter 13, verse 6, wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Therefore all hands will be feeble, and every human heart will melt, and they'll be dismayed. That's just a snippet. What we're saying here is there's a time when you've been trusting yourself, and you've been strutting around in all of your pride. You're going to say, oh no. And your hands will become feeble, and you'll be dismayed. Okay? Rudy's going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to get another verse, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. Verse 10, for the stars of the heaven and the constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising. The moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. And I'll put an end to the pride of the arrogant and lay low the insolence of tyrants. The religions of Isaiah's day, like, again, we have some religions today, worship the sun and the moon and the stars. And God says, I'm going to show you my power and my might. I'm going to turn out the lights. You're not going to be able to worship them. And then I'm going to lay low all the things that you have taken pride in. Your military might, your economy, your strength and your power, and all the things that build you up. I'm going to bring it down, ultimately, so that you will trust me. Rudy, I hope I haven't talked too much. Go for it.
Well, just to reiterate that the spirit behind Babylon is the evil one. And in chapter 14, we'll end up...
Right, we're going there next.
We're going there next. But it also allows us into the mind of the evil one. But to add to the point that Bob was making about the countries that surround Israel and Israel itself, because God was angry with Israel too, because they weren't being trustworthy either. Really, in the end, none of us really are. But God already knew that too. So, but I think about how do we really believe that God can win a war? Well, I think that the Exodus, really, which is the base of everything we believe, because Jesus' Passion Week corresponded to the plagues, and the 9th plague and the 10th plague in Egypt. But that story took 600 years to accomplish, and was told to Abraham that he was going to have a son. Really, he didn't even know that. Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed was what happened the next day after he found out that he was going to have a son. But he's also told that your people will get this land that you're living on right now, but only after they've been oppressed 400 years someplace else. Well, what God did in Egypt is that he allowed Egypt through the miracle of the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of lean to allow the Egyptian empire to become the wealthiest nation in the world. But because by the time the 7 years were over, everybody in Egypt had sold their land, their animals, and themselves to Pharaoh, and for the next 400 years, they end up giving Pharaoh 20% of everything that they made, which made him the first world power, of which we find out in the Exodus was nothing for God to defeat. That's one of the things we have to take away when we look about this world and we wonder how we can fix it. We can't. It takes him. And our joy of our salvation is that he told us that this was going to happen. We've seen these pictures in history so that we can trust him for our salvation now.
So let me just interrupt you because we're running towards the end and just say, let's take something away from this. Rudy is giving us a span of history that starts all the way back from Abraham and goes up to today. God is active in history. One thing we can learn is the proud, the arrogant, the self-sufficient, the know-it-all, the guy that's living out of his own best thinking, the lady that's doing the same thing, they're on the losing end of history. But God is moving throughout history, and if we trust him, like yesterday, he will be, we studied that chapter 12, he will be our salvation, and he will be our song.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks so much for being a part today. God bless you. Really thank you for your insights. And we'll see you tomorrow looking at what he just talked about, and that is the inner working, the mind of Babylon, but also the demise of Babylon by the power of God. Thanks so much. God bless you.